Alright guys, so this is going to be a little bit of a different one, and I don't actually remember if I covered this in the past, but we're going to talk about plantar fasciitis, what it is, how you can kind of address that, and again, this is kind of coming up right now because I'm a little bit frustrated right now with the physical therapy recommendations for my meniscus tear, because they're not looking in it, and this is just one of the things that I kind of get frustrated when it comes to physical therapists in general. At least my experience with them so far is that there's a very localized attitude when it comes to how we address injuries, and oftentimes what we now are starting to understand is that when there is a dysfunction somewhere in the body, it tends to have a global effect rather than a localized effect, or a global cause rather than a localized cause. And I think that there is very few conditions that are a better example of this than plantar fasciitis, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it. So I had plantar fasciitis in my left foot. It comes back once in a while, and part of that has to do with the fact that I wear Vibrams everywhere. I wear minimalist shoes, and so when you are wearing, kind of the philosophy when it comes to shoes in the US is, and probably all the way around the world, is that we wear these shoes for protection, right? And the more that we try to protect it, the more that we kind of control what the foot does, kind of unintentionally. And I chose to wear Vibrams probably about 10, 12 years ago, and I did it right, where I broke myself into them really, really close, slowly, so I wasn't running in them. I wasn't going and running on sand immediately after starting to wear them. And so I did give myself plenty of time to acclimate, and I wear them walking everywhere. And then I would go on like light jogs, and then I'd work my way up onto harder surfaces, and for longer distances and running harder. So, and this took a couple years to get my legs acclimated to that. And you usually find that you tend to get really sore in your calves because of this. You tend to not want to heel strike as much, so you forefoot strike more, and so your calves are now trying to adapt to it. And that's not the only way that you can get plantar fasciitis. In fact, that's not even a common way that you can get it. But over time, and as we get older, the plantar fascia does become less forgiving when it comes to the stresses that we put on it, and then it can get more aggravated. However, and I was just seeing a video this morning actually on this that was talking about plantar fasciitis and saying that we probably shouldn't even call it that anymore, because it's not an inflammation of the fascia that's the actual problem. And it's just like, right now with my meniscus tear, a lot of the discomfort and pain that I feel a lot of the time is happening here in the tendons for the muscles that are supporting the knee. So those are all kind of working in overdrive. Well, that's kind of a similar thing to what's going on in plantar fasciitis, is that the fascia is strained and it's inflamed because it's being put under tension, but it being put under tension is actually the problem. And so the classical thinking is that we're going to loosen up this plantar fascia so that it's more flexible, so that it can give further. But oftentimes when we look at the people that get plantar fasciitis, it's most oftentimes the people that have foot eversion, which means my foot will turn out when I walk and my arch will flatten, right? Which can lead to knee valgus and anterior pelvic tilt, or vice versa, because we are sitting in chairs all day long. When we go into the anterior pelvic tilt, which means if I were to put a marble on the top of my pelvis, it would roll off to the front and I'd look like I have a big butt, basically. Versus posterior pelvic tilt, where it looks like I'm tucking my tail like a scared dog, and that same marble would fall off to the back, right? So it's this type of thing. And when you go into anterior pelvic tilt, your knees come together. When you go into posterior, they tend to go outward. And when your knees come inward, your arch flattens and your foot turns out. When it goes outward, the opposite happens. So there are things that can be biomechanically affecting what's happening down in the foot. Now, I know that there probably aren't a lot of women that watch this channel. If there are, hello, how are you doing? You're welcome to be here. It's great. Wearing high heels is another common cause for plantar fasciitis. And what's happening in that scenario? Well, the calf muscle is sitting in a shortened position as we're going into this forced plantar flexion, which is, putting a lot of tension here in the knee or in the calf, and that calf is also going to lose mobility. So when we force ourselves to come back down to a flat-footed position and we start walking, then now, because this calf is shortened and overworked and tight, it's going to be pulling on the calcaneus, which when you see I go into a flat position and that calcaneus is getting pulled back and up. So if you think about it, when you go to bed every night, we tend to have blankets on our bed, and our feet, our relaxed position is kind of like that. So you see that I'm not in this dorsiflex position, but I'm actually halfway in this plantar flex position, and then we lay blankets on top of it, and that might just seal the deal. So now my calf is sitting in a very, very shortened position for a long period of time, 8 to 10 hours, right? And so since it's sitting in that shortened position, it's going to lose mobility. So, here you are trying to stretch out this plantar fascia, try to get more mobility in it, but it's not the problem, right? It's the symptom. The problem is oftentimes in the calf. Now, we can look, and this is again something that's been kind of aggravating me right now with the knee meniscus tear issue, is that my meniscus tear is on the posterior horn of the medial meniscus, so it's right around this area, right? But the meniscus is these two C's, right, that sit right here in the knee, and so there's two of them, one on either side, and the way that we treat meniscus tears is going to be the same regardless of where the meniscus tear is, which is really aggravating to me because the biomechanical changes that are going to happen in your leg because of where that tear is, so if the weakness is here, it's going to present differently than if the tear was here or here or here, right? It's like if you have four legs on a table, you cut out one leg, the table's going to fall to that direction, right? So the biomechanics in that knee are going to change in a way that's going to be different depending on where that tear happens to be. But the protocol for fixing it isn't the same. So keep in mind, when I'm talking about the things that you can do to address a plantar fasciitis, I'm speaking from, the perspective that you probably have a flat foot issue, right? Your foot probably turns out when you walk. Your calves are probably tight. Or you are sitting in a chair all day and you stand up and then you've got the anterior pelvic tilt, which is causing that knee adduction, which is causing that flattening of the foot. So, it might be that you need to do glute strengthening. It might be that you need to loosen your adductors. It might be that you need to loosen your hip flexors, your iliacus and psoas. Those are things that you could be doing if it's coming from the upper end, but most commonly it's going to be coming from the lower leg. So one way that we can start to address this is that we can start doing foam rolling. And again, I'm not going to be doing it on the bottom of my foot because that's not the problem. You can use either of these. I kind of almost always prefer to use this type than this type because again, when we are talking about plantar fasciitis, right, it's a foot flattening, which means that usually it's going to be this lateral side here, right, of the calf muscles, which is going to be your gastrocnemius and soleus, but it also can be some tightness that's happening here along the peroneus longus. So when we do foam rolling, we're trying to stimulate the Gogli tendon organ. In this case, because I'm having foot flattening issues, I'm going to turn my foot and knee outward so that I'm going along that lateral side. And look at the pace that I'm going at. If you go like this, as a lot of people do, you're going to excite the muscle tissue and it's going to get tighter. So we want to make sure that we are actually going at a stupidly slow pace. And I don't know why, but every time I talk to a client and I'm working with somebody, they never go at this pace, no matter how many times I say it, that you have to go really fucking slow. And if you're not, you're doing more harm than good. So here's going along that lateral calf. If I find a spot that is extra tense, like right there, I'll pause and I'll count to 30 on that, right? So I'm again going slow and I'm waiting for the muscle to release itself, or I'm waiting for myself to feel that tightness or that pain kind of melt away, which it will do. Then I can go peroneus longus. So I'm going on the lateral side, and I'm being careful not to go too far so I'm not hitting the front of my shin. So we have this muscle here that runs along the very front of my shin. You can feel that there's a hard part and then there's a soft part. And this is called your anterior tibialis. We follow that down, it crosses over the ankle, goes into our arch. If we loosen this muscle and we have a falling arch issue going on here, where the foot is flattening and turning out, the anterior tibialis actually doesn't need to be released. And so I don't want to kind of loosen that muscle up. So I want to go onto my side, right? And you can do this from a side plank position if that's easier for you to maintain. It's easier for me to get more weight into there, right? And that's a little bit fast. Right? About that speed. And I try to find those areas of tension. Now, if you want to progress it up, you can go into something that is harder. This is just a piece of ABS pipe that I have cut to about, I think this is 14, 16 inches long. It could be just 12, I don't know. I can measure, but whatever. But anyways, the thing I don't necessarily like about these is that if you're not used to it and you go into it, it can overexcite the muscle, and you can actually, if you were to, use this as a foam roller and then go running, you might run into cramping. So I would keep it on the softer side in the beginning. As you get more advanced and it hurts less, you can start to progress to this, but I would do this kind of more passively, like when you first wake up or something along those lines. Now, you could have something like this. You can use a towel. And this would be just for stretching, right? So I oftentimes, because I like to protect my knees, will put something under my knee, and then I'm just going to pull this back, right? And this is going to, because my knee's a little bit bent, it might hit the soleus a little bit more, but that's fine. They're usually both the issue here. And then what I can do is I can kind of push away for a couple seconds after I've held it for 20 seconds, and then release, and I'll usually find that I get a little bit more ankle mobility there. Now, if you don't want to coordinate that too much, you can get a heavy band. This one's a 50-pound band. Just be careful with the angle that you choose, because you don't want this coming back and snapping you in the face. So I can pull it back to get that stretch going, and then I can push it away and then let it come back. Now, if you're not going to go into hyperextension, I have a little bit of hypermobility in my knees in general, so, But anyways, I can push away, and I usually find that when it comes back, that I'm actually going to have a little bit more range of motion that comes out of that. So I can push the band away because it's elastic, and then I get a little bit more mobility. You want to be able to get about 20 degrees of mobility in your ankle. That's going to be your full range of motion. So from this 90-degree bend, I should be able to come up into dorsiflexion about 20 degrees. If you don't have that, then your calves are absolutely definitely tight. So one way that we can kind of try to figure out where a problem is happening. And I had somebody actually get on me about this at 24 because she had read it in a book that you're not supposed to ever do squats with your heels elevated. But when you're doing squats and you're having somebody observe you, if you're doing it barefoot on the floor, right, and you have all these symptoms showing up, so you're seeing the arches flattening, the foot's turning out, the knees coming in, maybe there's a hip shift or something going on there, you can use those things to kind of see, okay, this is what's happening on a global scale. Then you elevate them using a 2x4 or something like that. You elevate your heels up, and you see if the symptoms go away. If the symptoms go away when you elevate the heels up, that means the calf is definitely the part that is way too tight, right? If it doesn't, then we need to kind of check other areas, but that's oftentimes, you'll see that when you lift up the calf, now we're moving into a range of motion where that tension is not going to be affecting the rest of your joints as much, so you can kind of be a little bit more prescriptive about that. Moving on a little bit, when it comes to like strengthening for plantar fasciitis, oftentimes what they'll have you do is they'll have you take a towel and you put it under your toes and you just kind of work it in. The other one is that we kind of go from the outside, we'll move the towel to the inside, right? They might have you push it out and bring it in, push it out, bring it in. And again, this is very locally trained, and it's just kind of strengthening that plantar fascia a little bit. And so what fascia is it's actually kind of the outer coating of your muscles that kind of hold the fibers as a bundle. And so that's what's kind of being irritated and whatnot here. So we're really, when we're doing this, we're kind of strengthening that medial fascia and whatnot. The other thing that might be happening, especially if there is tightness in this lateral gastrocnemius, we might need to balance that. So one thing that we can do is we can put an elastic band around our ankles and push our heels out, making sure that they're staying parallel as we're going through calf raises. So if you're using calf raise machine, or you can use a staircase or anything like that to kind of go up and down, up and down. But we want to keep, about shoulder width apart and keep our feet in parallel as we're doing that with the band around there, so that we're trying to fight this eversion and trying to keep ourselves in a more anatomically correct position and training in that position, so we get more balance throughout the calf muscle, so we're not over tightening along here. And again, I mentioned, when we go to bed, we have that blanket effect where we go into this plantar flexion. There are ankle braces, you can get them at Walgreens or pretty much anywhere, Amazon, that are just hard plastic, and they just have Velcro that goes around here, and you just wear that when you go to bed. And what that does is it just stops you from allowing you to go into this plantar flexion. It doesn't have to be super tight. We're just trying to keep ourselves in this more stretched position so that the muscle doesn't get tight in the first place. Sometimes we can find that if we've been doing a lot of this work to the calf and it's not necessarily getting better, we're always feeling tight, we can potentially assume that the problem is a little bit higher up too. If we have tension that's along, especially this lateral hamstring, we might actually see that translate down through the calf muscle and into the lower leg. So we can actually start working on doing hamstring stretches, deadlifts and things like that as well. So again, just foam rolling up here, doing hamstring stretches. One thing that I would say about doing hamstring stretches is, like for example, I might do one here that might work more of that this type of range of motion, where I bring my knee in as tight as I can to my hips. I get my other leg as straight as I can. It's a little hard for me with the tear there, but I'm going to get here, and I'm just going to straighten my leg until I start feeling a stretch here, right? I'm keeping my knee close to my body, so I'm already stretched on this side, and I'm coming up, and then I might do a little bit of a hamstring curl, and then let myself go a little bit further into that stretch. Hold it for a couple seconds, curl, and straighten. And that you might feel that up here in the calf as well, but if you're having tightness that's up here, it can translate into here. I'm sure you've all felt this before when you do one of these stretches where you're coming down and trying to bring your chest to your knee here, and you pull your toes back and you feel the stretch all the way throughout here. We have connected fascia here that's actually going to translate that tension. So we want to, so again, that's one of the reasons why we're assuming that potentially the plantar fasciitis that we're feeling down here could be hamstring tightness from here. And again, that can be coming from sitting at a desk all day or things along those lines. So if we need to release that, we can use a foam roller, we can use this guy, whatever. And we can start doing those stretches throughout here to kind of see if that's going to be the issue that's contributing to that. Other things that could be is like a glute weakness, right? So for glute weakness, one thing that we can do, so particularly the glute major, right? That's particularly the problem here. So we can do leg raises with external rotation, right? We can do this with a band. We can put a band around our knees, and I didn't pull out of the bag, so I apologize. We can do clamshells. So we're going here and we're opening up. Make sure that when we're opening up that we're not falling down. We actually want to be thinking about projecting our hips forward as we go up into that open up position, right? We can put our shoulders on a bench or a couch, right? And we can do bridges, tap down and up. Make sure that when we're doing bridges of any kind, that we're not arching our back to get up. We are trying to drive it from the hip. So I actually think opposite here. So I tuck my tail like a scared dog as I'm going up, and I push my belly button in, so I'm going into that posterior pelvic tilt as I'm coming up. That way I'm forcing myself to not use my lower back to get my arch to happen. I can also put a band around my knees when I'm doing that, so that I'm pushing against that band, so I'm getting that extension, external rotation happening as I'm bridging up, so I'm putting more tension into my glutes. And you might find that it's like putting, 45 pounds on a bar on each side and doing a barbell thrusters with your hips as well, which would be a good exercise to do, but you'll probably find that just putting the band around your knees is going to have the same effect. It's engaging your glutes in a different way, but the fibers of the glutes go along your iliac crest and along your sacrum, and then they attach into your femur, and they cause this external rotation as well as that abduction and extension. So hitting that in more than one way at the same time is actually going to be quite beneficial for strengthening the glutes and getting them stronger, to kind of enforce the external rotation that's going to stop that knee adduction, right, which is going to lift up your arch, and it's going to take strain off of that plantar fascia. So again, what I'm advocating for here, you can, if it makes you feel better, take a water bottle, put it in the freezer, and then roll out the bottom of your fascia to try to loosen that up. But again, if it's a global thing, which oftentimes it is, we want to be addressing what's happening in the calf, what's happening in the thighs, what's happening in the hips. One last thing that's going to be kind of an aggressive way of doing this, and I did this for a friend recently, which is just going to be cupping, right? So there are just, pump style cups that you can do. Put lotion along this lateral calf right here, right? And then you're going to, especially if you can palpate, if you've got a good sense of touch, you can kind of feel areas that are tight or where there might be an adhesion. And when you find those spots, you're going to put the cup kind of near that with lotion all the way up and down, and you're going to suck a fair amount up, right? For me, it's like 1.5 hand pumps, maybe a little bit more or less depending. And it shouldn't be enough that the cupping site is turning purple immediately. And then you're going to let it sit there for about 20 seconds or so, and then you move it up and down along this lateral side of the calf, and that will help to break up any adhesions that are in there, loosen up that material really quickly, and that will again be kind of a little bit more of an aggressive way of loosening up this tightness that might be contributing to your plantar fasciitis. Massage obviously would help throughout there, so just massaging through, especially that lateral side. Grafted technique, or what's called instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization, where you take a metal blade and scrape through here, might be beneficial for that as well. Again, it's just trying to loosen up that fascial tissue, loosen up the muscle so that it can actually allow for the calcaneus to relax, and it brings tension off of that plantar fascia so that it can heal, and that you're not going to feel as much of that inflammation. And I have generally found that really focusing on that lateral tension has been the most effective thing for the most of the people that I have worked with. So that's what I have for you guys. I hope that this is helpful for you. I'm sorry if that's something that you're going through. And again, any issues that you guys are having biomechanically, I'm happy to give you guys advice on that. And try to think of things a little bit more globally whenever you have the chance to, because anything that's going on, I haven't even talked about how, dealing with plantar fasciitis on one leg might affect your neck and shoulders, and it absolutely could, because you're going to have movement pattern changes. I definitely am going to take, a couple years after this knee is healed, trying to address the limp that I have now developed with it, that has become a learned habit as well as a muscle balance issue. That's definitely going to affect the stability of my low back. It's definitely going to affect the stability of my hips. It's definitely going to probably lead to headaches and shoulder issues as well. So, when you have something that is going to affect your biomechanics locally, it can absolutely affect everything globally. as far as, when you do have plantar fasciitis, it is generally recommended to go for thicker soled shoes like Hoka's, to just take the pressure off of the plantar fascia so that it can heal. I do find this generally decent advice, but again, it's too locally focused. If you're wearing footwear that is too dependent on arch support, or is not dependent enough on arch support, and it really is going to be personal to you. Look at what you've been doing over a long period of time to decide what kind of footwear is actually going to be best for you. Because if you are wearing something like Converse, where they're flat and they're going to be forcing your feet into a flattened position, which I believe that a lot of shoes do, and that's why arch support is actually what it is. Because if you think about it, you wear these things that oftentimes have a tight toe box, for one, which is going to affect the way that you move. That's one of the reasons why I wear minimalist shoes. But the other thing that's happening is that when you tie your shoelaces and whatnot, it's going to be putting some downward pressure on that arch, and it's going to start flattening that out. So having arch supports does definitely help with that, or just going to shoes that aren't going to encourage foot flattening like that is probably going to help. As far as like orthotics or other types of inserts, those can be very helpful for a lot of people as far as like reducing the amount of strain on a temporary scale. But when you have a tightness in your body, you want, the foot is not meant to just hold in a solid state position all the time, which is what a lot of shoes really, really do. And a lot of the podiatrist attitude is, let's control what's happening in the foot as much as possible, but our foot is actually designed to flex and bend and move, and we have to actually allow it to do that from time to time. And I know that we're getting a little bit too much into my minimalist shoe philosophy, especially since that is not something that is as backed by science as I would like it to be. And it's contextual, right? And I don't really want to get into that right now, because I think that is its own video, and it's going to be a lot of opinion-based stuff that I can go into the science on. But for right now, while you're healing from plantar fasciitis, you might find that you get relief from having more arch support and more padding in your shoes. In the long run, I think that's short-sighted. I think that you need to reintroduce, as your fascia is strong enough to do that, once you've released all this tension here, that you need to reintroduce mobility back into your feet so that you are not wearing flip-flops, because those actually can cause plantar fasciitis, but something that you don't have to worry about it staying on your foot, and that is a little bit more minimal and allows more movement. Is, I think, a better long-term strategy. But again, that's going into opinion rather than what I usually try to do here, which is going to be more factually based. So we'll get into that on another video, and I will put in all the necessary disclaimers. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this is helpful for you. If you've been trying all this forever and ever and it's not working for you, hit me up. Let's talk about your specific case, and let's see if we can get you better. All right? Talk to you guys later. Bye.